everybody in the world buy?
Hello everybody and welcome back into the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. Before we get into our second segment of today's show, I do want to remind you yet again to consider liking, following, and subscribing to the show and the network as a whole. It is greatly appreciated by all concerned here at the network, especially me and my fellow podcasters. And also, as you can see on my screen, leave a super chat, super thanks, or super stickers feature here on YouTube in my comments section, and I will read it on the show, read your opinions. I definitely want them because I love your input on the show. It really makes this show grow. Most importantly, if you do with our other podcasters, go check them out as well. It will make the network even better, even more popular, so that even more fantastic content can be distributed to you guys as well. But without further ado, let's jump right into our second segment of today's show, talking about my fantasy stars, starting off in the NFL, and then on the other side of the next break, we'll be talking about college football. But to start off with the NFL, I only have 3 guys for today, and 2 of them played in perhaps the best game of the season thus far, especially because it was a divisional contest that meant so much. I could have picked a myriad number of players, maybe even a couple of defenses, because a lot of fantastic defensive performances, a lot of defensive touchdowns this weekend as well in the NFL. But these are the 3 that I feel really solid about talking about, and I want to deliver to you guys for your consideration. So without further ado, let's talk about these 3 fantastic players from Week 5 of the NFL season. Starting off at the wide receiver position. And this guy's going to have to become even more and more important for his team. They are in a bit of a hole. I can't necessarily say whether or not they can get out of it because their division is so competitive, and this was a divisional game, like I said, that they were playing in. But as long as they have this wide receiver at their disposal, they have a chance in every single game they have moving forward. And that is, wrong graphic there. Wrong player there. Let's just skip ahead to Jamar Chase here. He had a big game, albeit in a losing effort. Very painful loss for the Cincinnati Bengals. My condolences to any Cincinnati Bengals fans that might be watching. But it was a very fascinating game. But it proved that the Cincinnati Bengals can still hang with everybody, and their defenses and their kind of woes are more defensive than offensive, so to speak. Jamar Chase, 10 receptions, 193 yards, 2 touchdowns in this game for a grand total of 41.3 fantasy points. He still maintains that wide receiver 1 status. So if you're feeling down about how the Bengals are playing, don't feel down about how Jamar Chase is playing. Because in terms of a fantasy perspective, he still is going to give you big, gaudy numbers week in, week out. And not for nothing, the Bengals have a quote-unquote easier slate of games coming up. Yes, the Giants, they just won against my Seattle Seahawks in a game I do not wish to talk about, but I feel like week in, week out, the Bengals are going to be competitive. As long as they have Joe Burrow, as long as they have Jamar Chase, as long as T. Higgins is still there, I just feel like there's nothing to really worry about offensively. The defense is where all the problems lie, and if they don't figure that out well, then they could be in a hole that they can't dig out of, even to get to, say, 7 wins. But as long as that offense is clicking, like it has in the past couple of games, they're going to be in games, and Jamar Chase is going to continue to deliver for your fantasy team. So therefore, he is one of my fantasy stars of the week. My second fantasy star, going back, is a guy who I was kind of not all in on headed into the season, right? Because he was a supplementary running back who I didn't necessarily know a lot of coming out of college, but has completely supplanted Travis Etienne in Jacksonville and might be the X factor going forward for what Jacksonville is going to have to do to try and compete to get back into the NFC South race. The AFC South race, rather. And that is Tank Bigsby. And Tank Bigsby is a classic back, right? He's not someone who is going to give you explosive play after explosive play. He's going to wear you down. There's a reason his name is Tank. And I feel like with Jacksonville, you have to kind of, A, take the pressure off Trevor Lawrence, but B, most importantly, give him a game plan where he feels comfortable with his best trait, and that is the deep ball. So if you run the football effectively, like they do with Trey Bigsby, then I guarantee you, and this is what happened in this game against Indy, the deep ball will be open for Trevor Lawrence, and he'll feel more comfortable throwing it. Tank Bigsby, kudos to him for having 13 carries, 101 yards, and 2 TDs, 25.9 fantasy points in this game, because it shows a blueprint and a way forward for the Jacksonville offense. I'm not as, completely worried about how it profiles going forward, because it shows that Doug Peterson assessed the situation. Maybe not necessarily Doug Peterson, but perhaps even Trevor Lawrence as well assessed the situation, saw ways they can improve, and they ultimately had a game plan going into this game. And hopefully going forward, for any Jags fans out there, this is what the Jags offense will look like. But Tank Bigsby is still going to be an X factor no matter what they do on the offensive side of the ball going forward. But it gives me confidence, that at least Jacksonville has a contingency plan for where, if Trevor hasn't settled in after a couple of games, they can go to a guy like Tank Bigsby to deliver the goods for them. So he is one of my 3 NFL fantasy stars of Week 5. And the last one, I think you guys saw this coming. It's Lamar Jackson at the QB position. I feel like Lamar, what he's done over the past couple of weeks is admirable for someone who had to not necessarily go through too much change on the offensive side of the football with this team and how Derrick Henry kind of comes in and compliments him. But he did have to kind of adjust his style of play a little bit, right? Because at the start of the season, the problems within this offense lay in the offensive line, their inability to protect Lamar. Now, the way they're kind of accounting for it is by having Lamar be a passer, but also keeping defenses wary of Derrick Henry, right? Because you can't necessarily load the box as a team like Baltimore to stop Derrick Henry. Because what I thought, and what perhaps many defenses thought, was that, well, Derrick Henry is not like any back that has been in Baltimore in the Lamar Jackson era, and that he's more of a workhorse. He's not like a guy like Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, who can't go off for a 35-year run anymore, and besides, he is aging out. That mentality is out the window from what we've seen from Derrick Henry. And we're not going to see anyone like Derrick Henry for very long who has that longevity into his 30s, so to speak. I think that how this helps Lamar, in turn, is it allows him to say, okay, if Derrick Henry is keeping defenses honest, then perhaps less and less pressure will be faced by me. And so I'll have ways to improvise, say, if my offensive line does break out, but I'll have plays where I can take shots down the field, and defenses will also have to respect my arm, and which makes it an even bigger challenge to defend both me and Derrick Henry. And this kind of leads to a performance like this, where he's 26 for 42 for 348 yards and 4 touchdowns for a grand total of 33.42 fantasy points. Now, going forward, as Andre said, have to worry about Henry and Lamar's read option. That's one big part of it, because what I loved about how Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins played the read option is that that play, at least on the defensive perspective of things, was going to be a big chunk play, no matter who got the football in that situation. So I do feel like in that regard they are kind of limited. But what Derrick Henry does do better than I believe either Edwards or Dobbins is not to stay healthy, right? Because that's a big part of why, perhaps the running attack in Baltimore grew stagnant in those seasons that Edwards and Dobbins were there. But what I love what Henry does is that he's just a straight workhorse back who, if he gets out in open space, you're in trouble, because he's a brilliant example of balance to speed. He's someone who can absorb that first hit, take you with him for another 3 to 4 yards if it's a chunk play and you're wearing him down, or he can just burst through the middle for like a 75-yard run or an 87-yard run like we saw in that first play against Buffalo. He's just a very interesting back. I did doubt whether or not he did fit into the system right to start the year, and that's on me because I kind of viewed it as an old age thing and not necessarily, a whole approach thing for the Baltimore offense. But all those fears have subsided of what we'll see, or what we're seeing from the Baltimore offense. And now I kind of trust that no matter what happens throughout the game, no matter what goes awry for Baltimore, they'll have a plan. Because if Lamar's doing this, and you still have to worry about Derrick Henry, good luck to the rest of the AFC. Because this looks like perhaps the most dangerous team here. And they're only going to grow into the season, right? And the fact that, yes, just beating the Bengals in a divisional game isn't as big as, say, beating the Steelers, who they're still chasing down, as Andre said, favorite props for tonight. For tonight, before we go to the break, I guess say I am wary of, Alvin Kamara, because I want to see Derek Carr be aggressive in this game. As Andre said, I can't trust Derek Carr against this team that historically owns him. Well, I can't trust him either, but at the end of the day, I do want to see more of the deep ball than Alvin Kamara, right? Because you still have to account for Carr's deep ball, because I still trust his deep ball as a quarterback in the NFL. But that being said, I still think out of all the prop bets for the Saints, Alvin Kamara is the most appealing, because he's going to get 20 to 25 touches still in this game. On the Chiefs side of things, I kind of feel like Patrick Mahomes' yardage total is going to go up. For some reason, I feel like he's going to find different receivers, play mistake-free football, and ultimately find a way to win this game. Not necessarily through the explosive play, but maybe there will be one or two in this game. But he's going to compile a lot of yards in doing it. So take the over on Patrick Mahomes and cautiously take the over on Alvin Kamara, because I still think Derek Carr can be an X factor in this game. And that's just me. Let me know what you think in the comments about my fantasy stars, about anything about tonight's game, anything. But we do have to take a quick break. And on the other side, we're talking about college football for a little bit, for 2 segments actually. Going on my fantasy stars, and then 2 segments from now, my Heisman odds update. But we'll be right back after this short break to talk about that, so don't go anywhere.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk?